Hello, dear friends. Here we are both through Kardec Radio broadcast and also here with you, Facebook Live. We are here today to talk about a new chapter of this 21-day journey with Paul and Stephen. Hi, Leticia. And it's a journey to strengthen ourselves. It's very important for us to meditate on the reasons why we're doing this. Soon after the elections of the United States of America, the Spirit Mentors have asked us to study this book together with you and bring about the 20 chapters plus the preface to you, and with a discussion, grasp and extract all the information that we need to strengthen ourselves and calibrate for what is ahead of us. Hi, Angelita. Thank you, friends. And if you're listening to Kardec Radio, you can also go to Facebook Live at Vanessa Anceloni for now. Later, it's going to be all published at the YouTube channel of Kardec Radio. Some chapters, 8 chapters are already there. Adriano Barbo is here with us, and he's helping us as well. So, the chapters we are reading is about the transformation. Saul of Tarsus already found out that it was not worthwhile to be stuck in his ego. You know, it's all about selfishness and pride. In Spiritism, we talk about selfishness and pride, and everywhere else in the world, we talk about ego. So, just to cut it short, we say ego, okay? E-G-O, for those who are listening to us. Hi, Valeria. And it's very, very important to meditate on how we're doing nowadays. Especially today, we've got to know that a major dictator on the earth, Fidel Castro, discarnated. It's a good moment for us to reflect, because we need to think about our feelings regarding it too. Often we think that evil is external to ourselves, is always somewhere out there, and we often forget that in the past we may have done worse. So should we wish him bad wishes that he reincarnates elsewhere or incarnates elsewhere? Well, we hope he finds his pathway to Jesus, he calibrates himself and recalculates his route. The sooner the better for him and for everyone connected to him. We are all interconnected. Hi, Marcelo. Adriano. Marcelo is sending you a big hug. Thank you, Marcelo. Now, Saul is also on his journey. We are on a journey too. And often we want a very comfortable journey, right? I've read today, thanks to our friend Andre Moreira, about something very special that Pope Francis mentioned. That often, he says, the sofa of joy. And he mentions that often we search for a couch where we can find comfort and meet friends and be tranquil, etc. And he says, Pope Francis says, well, Jesus was not the king of comfort. So we cannot expect to sit back and relax while people are suffering. And in this worry world, very difficult world, we need fraternity. These are Pope Francis' words and a good reminder for us. Saul of Tarsus too, once he found out the pathway with Jesus, he gave up on comfort. He, at the end of the first chapter of the second part, which is for us chapter 11, Emmanuel discloses that he made sure of traveling on foot. He wanted to lead a new life with austerity, meaning more coherent with the teachings. How often we talk about simplicity and humility, and our lives are so complicated. Let me share how complicated our lives can be. For example, Black Friday. Black Friday happened all over the world. We have a coffee maker. And then suddenly we go around and, you know what, this coffee maker, it's a good price. I'm going to buy a new one. Well, what's going to happen with the other one we bought last year? I'm not going to use it. Maybe I will use it another day. And then we have 3, 4 coffee makers. That's complicated. Simplicity is something else. We're done with coffee makers. If you're done, done. You don't need a new model. We don't need a fancier thing. Maybe you do, but we're just saying, why complicating life? We complicate life so much, that then we regret the complications we create in our own lives. Hi, Eleni. Hi, Joyce. Hi, Rita Di Cassia. Thank you so much for your kindness. Hi, Amanda. So, find joy in simplicity, Valeria is reminding us. It is true. How can we simplify our lives? Sometimes going vegan. I have 2 vegan friends here, Amanda and Leticia. They can tell us about how simpler life can be when we go vegan. So simple we don't know how to be vegans. It's true. It's true. By the way, Adriano, Joyce is sending you a hug. She's saying hi to you. So, Saul is an example for us. He is now open to simplicity. He's open to a new pathway. Under the fronds of a solitary date palm, the Damascus convert took advantage of the silence for deep meditation. Often we find silence around and we quickly turn something on because we feel like we can't be lonely. But how about using loneliness and a little bit of a break to actually meditate? Hi, Jussara. It's an honor to have you here too. So, Saul of Tarsus is in this new journey, the journey of the dry lands of his heart. Every single beat of this journey and the descriptions of Emmanuel are certainly for us a psychological new understanding of our inner journey. When we travel from the ego to the self, to strengthening ourselves, we go through the desert of our hearts. Because for the longest time, we abandoned the best part of us, our divine essence. So here he comes, chapter 12. We were already there. I'm just recapping a few things. He enters the city of Palmyra, and let us send our best thoughts to Syria and all the beautiful lands who are being challenged by the current wars. As we read this book through Paul and Stephen, and he enters all these cities, Palmyra and Damascus, etc., it makes us feel for all the ones who are there now. No hospitals, no conditions to live whatsoever, completely besieged by the wars. So we hope that the vibrations of all of us today can bring some comfort, some relief to the heart of everyone, both the refugees in the refugee camps and those who are still in the cities of Syria. So the weaver, he entered the city of Palmyra and he found his mentor. Remember, we stopped when he found his mentor. How often, like toddlers, we think we can do all by ourselves. When we grow mature, we learn we need people who are more experienced than us to guide us, to also ponder major decisions, whether these mentors are in the spiritual realm or the physical, but law of society. law of society. We're all together, and we can't lose sight that we're going to be stronger together, stronger together. And this is not a political statement, by the way, okay? And he asks to see Gamaliel. He goes and meets Gamaliel, and he hears that Gamaliel is not doing well. He's weaker. He's sad by knowing of it, but Hezekiah is very friendly, hospitable, and is saying, I'm going to bring you to your mentor. So Saul of Tarsus goes and meets him. They embrace. It's so good to have good, loyal, trustworthy friends. And he says to Saul, Saul, my son, I knew I was mistaken about the Savior who spoke to me so profoundly in my exhausted old age through the spiritual light of his gospel of redemption. Jesus has deigned to stretch out his loving hands to your devoted spirit. The vision of Damascus will be enough for you to consecrate you in your entire life to the Messiah's love. It's true that you worked hard for the law of Moses without hesitating to adopt extreme measures in its defense, but the time has come for you to work for the one who is greater than Moses. But how does Saul feel? And this is the beauty of it all, my friends. What we're going to hear now is not trivial. And thanks to Emmanuel's descriptions through Chico Xavier, we get to know that Saul had a good hold of his emotions. He was not afraid about talking about his emotions. Let's not forget, he was a man of 2 millennia ago. And he was already ahead of many men of the time, and even women of nowadays, who are afraid of talking about emotions. Look how emotionally aware he is, which is one of the first pillars of emotional intelligence. We can only shift our lives when we are aware of what we feel. And Saul murmurs, full of trust, but I feel so disoriented and confused. Can you believe it, my friends, that a man like Saul was humble enough to come to his mentor and say, I am lost, I'm confused. Ever since that event, I have noticed I have been the object of peculiar and radical changes. Of course, obedient to my completely sincere character, virtue, sincerity. I wanted to bring my work for Christ in Damascus, yet I received a major show of contempt and ridicule from our friends there. I suffered greatly from it. You see, he confesses. He opens his heart. Are we opening our hearts to the loyal friends in our lives, or are we just putting a face? And we find no place for emotional relief, which is so important. Emotional exchange, which is vital. That's why Jesus came to us. He was not afraid of talking about emotions. By the way, he named his news the good news that bring joy. Joy and emotion. An emotion that shall sustain us through a productive life. Hi, Alan Mitchell. Thank you for joining us. And I suffered greatly from it. I suddenly found myself without friends, without anyone. When we change, our spiritual network changes. Thank God. But don't worry about the friends that are gone. Sooner or later, they're going to find a pathway too. We bless them, but we can't force them to stay with us. And we can't stay with them anymore because we're changed. And if we resist, we're going to be missing the boat of life. And we're going to drown again in the waters of our difficult emotions. And he says, Zadok himself, who in childhood was my father's pupil, showered me with recrimination and mockery. You see, even childhood friends may turn their back on us. I wanted to return to Jerusalem, but after the scene at the synagogue in Damascus, I understood what would be waiting for me on a greater scale with the authorities of the Sanhedrin and temple. So friends, this moment, the question is, are we like Zadok or Saul after his transformation? Even if we are spiritists, we need to be truly calibrated, not to make, as we talked yesterday, not to make this pathway a repetition of our old mistakes of previous lives, when we were too focused on the church-like way of living, when hierarchy was more important than helping the suffering. Let's remember Mother Teresa. She was respectful to the church, but she couldn't lose sight that there were people outside her windows who were dying. And she said, I'm sorry, church. You want me to stay here in these four walls, teaching these girls? That's noble. But it would be criminal for me to stay here while I see those people dying every day. After all, the message of Jesus is about reaching out to those who are suffering. And yesterday, the last question we asked is a reminder for us today. If we want to know if we're on the right track, the thermometer. Thermometer, what is it? To measure if we are truly encountering those who are suffering. If we're just meeting friends who have administrative positions and who have bureaucratic things to do, etc., we are not doing our jobs, which is to change ourselves and to reach out to those who are suffering. When we focus on those who are suffering, we don't have time for chit-chat about discussing too much on how to do charity. We just do it. We've never heard Chico Xavier. Meetings after meetings after meetings. That's why the Spirit Side of Virginia, we have no meetings to discuss anything. We just go and do what we have to do. We prepare ourselves, but we don't go on like discussing the mission, what to do, and the objective of the objective of the objective while people are suffering and while people don't have enough to do. And we are not talking about suffering physically, we're talking about spiritual suffering. Now we have lots of venues. We have Facebook Live, we have YouTube Live, and we could have all major organizations, spiritist organizations in this world using more and more often these venues to reach out to those who are suffering, spiritually especially, psychologically especially. And we are missing that. We're missing it. We can't be mingling too much with those who are supposed to be working for who is in need. So that's something for us to meditate upon and roll our sleeves and work. He asks his teacher for guidance, and Gamaliel starts revealing a lot of important things for us. He says, you have mentioned the humiliation you experienced in the synagogue in Damascus. However, such examples are clear and convincing. At present, I am too considered a peaceful lunatic in my circles. Who cares what people think about us, right? People change every day. They love us today, they hate us tomorrow, they think we're crazy the other day. They did this with Jesus too, so we can't rely upon. And when people are applauding us too much, watch out, we're probably in the wrong direction. In Jerusalem, you saw Simon Peter vilified for loving God's poor and giving them shelter. You saw Stephen stoned to death, and who knows what else. Christ himself, the Redeemer of humanity, did not escape being martyred on a scornful cross between criminals condemned by the justice of this world. The Master's lesson is too great for his disciples to expect political control or wealth in his name. We can't be political in the spiritist circles. If the one who was pure and sinless par excellence walked this world amid suffering and misunderstanding, Jesus, it would not be right for us to expect repose and an easy life in our miserable conditions as sinners. Friends, thanks to the mentor Gamaliel, we have our first quiz of the day. We were inspired by Pope Francis. He was talking exactly about the same words. Can we expect comfort in our lives? If our spiritist center is less comfortable than in our homes, then it's a sign that we're in the wrong direction. If what we do is solely for the benefit of us, we're in the wrong direction. If after Jesus coming to the world and opening the doors to a new paradigm of living, it's not about religious, simply like a traditional religious pathway. It's about way of living. He's calling you and I and everyone. And the first quiz of the day. How much comfort do we expect in our everyday lives? 0 to 10, 0 being, no, not at all. I don't expect any comfort. And 10, I expect that people give me VIP and my life is kind of easy and I want people to help me because this, that, and the other. So, question for us today. Where are we regarding the expectation of having a comfortable life and finding repose and an easy life? 0 to 10, where are we? Aha, hi Felipe. Thank you for the love. So listen to those soft and stern words. Love this combination. We love the spiritist description of this emotional body language we are learning firsthand. Soft but stern. Let us visualize it. Soft but stern. Soft but stern. Remember in the other chapter we were learning about the combination feminine and masculine? Again and again, Emmanuel gives us in each and every chapter opportunities for us to learn the neurons in our brain, a new pathway for us to be created when we combine the best of our feminine compassion with the best of our masculine determination together. Soft but stern. True. Gamaliel serenely. Remember, he was stern, but he was serene. As for the difficulties you say you've been experiencing since the incident in Damascus, nothing could be more just and natural in my experienced view of the world's problems. Problems that exist to date. Let us not forget that the book we are reading was published in July of 1941. The middle of Second World War, my friends. Chico Xavier didn't stop working because the world was convulsing in a war. I see many people on Facebook who are like, oh my gosh, just like the Minions in the Despicable Me movie. They're like, desperate. I don't know what to do. Where do I go? They don't say those words because they can't speak that way. But they're like, but we're not the Minions. We have reasoning. We know what to do. We have a direction. And during war times, what do? Work, serve, be fraternal. As Pope Francis said, forget about the couch of comfort and go extend your hands to those who are suffering. That's the goal for us. And he says here to our dear friend who is still learning from him, our dear friend Saul. He says, perhaps you haven't pondered enough the revelations of the Promised Land. How significant would that region be if, in keeping with a more far-ranging understanding of God, we were to discover sources of His watch care everywhere in the world. Ta-da! The promised land is nowhere. It's inside of us. Are you happy now to know it could be everywhere? For people who are migrating, don't be sad because the promised land of joy is not in a single place. It can be anywhere because it's in the heart. Gamaliel, after Jesus found out the promised land is not a particular location, it is in the hearts of all of us. It is inside of us. He says, leafy, protective date palms flourish in the burning sands. Don't these generous trees transform the desert itself into a blessed place loaded with divine bread to satisfy our hunger? During my solitary reflections, I came to the conclusion that the land promised by divine revelation is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Who is trying to find happiness? Raise your hand. Everybody, raise your hand. You and me, everybody, right? We all want happiness and joy. Where is it? How can we find it? How can I turn on the GPS to find it? What is the address? Well, Gamaliel found out. The teachings of Jesus contain the address for us to reach the promised land of joy. Meaning, if we follow through, we'll get there. In each and every chapter, we are going to find bridges to the gospel of Jesus, to the gospel according to Spiritism. When we read in the gospel according to Spiritism about the worlds created by God, we've got to know that there's no place on this universe that is more blessed than the other. Maybe more evolved, but each and every one is a home and a school for all of us, the souls. The earth, in the past, was the place of exile of souls who were criminals. Here we are. We're getting better. There are other planets who are receiving, earthly beings. They're exiled because they do not want to conform to these teachings. But those places are blessed too. They're not cursed. They're blessed. Sometimes we make a joke about, if we don't conform with the teachings, we're going to be sent to the planet of the apes. We're joking about it because, deep inside, all planets in this universe, all worlds in all the realms, spiritual and material, they are blessed. So Gamaliel talks about the courage of the ancestors, and courage is a trademark of those who want to follow the teachings of Jesus. And he says, you allege you feel strange. That's how we feel when we start changing. It feels awkward. And he says, due to the change of your line of work and the lack of money for your immediate needs. However, if you would meditate a bit on the reality of the facts, you would see clearly. An old man like me is in the same situation as Moses, beholding the promised land, but unable to enter it. But as for you, you must realize that you're still very young. You can increase your energies by training your strength and enter the land of the Savior's aspirations regarding us. To do so, it's crucial that you simplify your life and begin your struggle all over again. Okay, recipe for us today in these difficult times, the challenging times. Simplify your life. Is it too hard? Sometimes simplify professionally too. Often we think that, the more status, the more money, and there we have our families without our presence. And our children getting into drug addictions because we're not present. And Marriage is falling apart because we're too focused on anything else but the family, the relationship. It's not about that childish romantic relationship we're talking about. We're talking about when spouses find in each other respect, and they find in each other brother and sisters, or brother and brother, sister and sister, it doesn't matter the sexual orientation, but brothers and sisters in God. Before our spouse is our spouse, we are brothers and sisters, brothers and brothers, sister and sister, before God. How does that make us feel? Some people tell me, Vanessa, everything was well until we tied the knot. Well, there are many reasons, but one of them is probably you forgot the essence. The essence is we are friends of one another, first and foremost. Then the commitment to that next step shall be sacred. As long as we work on it, knowing that before we are spouses, we are brother and sister before God. How can we ever mistreat a divine being who is with us? But we cannot allow ourselves to be abused either. Self-love. It's a difficult balance. But if we work on it and we ask for help, we can make it. Hi, Rosani. Hi, Luciana. So here we have, friends. He's asking for advice. How often do you ask for advice? But remember, asking for advice from the right people. And the best one is always the guardian angel first. Even if we're not mediums, the guardian angel is always the number one in the line of asking for advice. How do we do it? Prayer, and then listen to the counsel. Soul is asking for advice. He says, what would you like to advise me to do? And again, Emmanuel, another chapter, reveals to us that childhood is everything. All the chapters this far, they come to us and say, childhood. Childhood is the foundation to a successful life. Successful spiritually. I want to say that I know your father, as well as his wealthy status. Of course, out of love, he would not refuse to provide you with all the help possible in this urgent state of affairs. So he's saying, go talk to your father. Well, we know, next step, he goes and knows that in childhood, prior to achieving this position of Doctor of the Law, he says, in keeping with the customs of our people, my father sent me to learn the work of a weaver, as we know. Your father could not have given you a more priceless gift. With a peaceful smile, that's how Gamaliel said. He had the foresight of all the heads of the families of God's people. Labor is the sacred movement of life. We must eat our bread by the sweat of our brow. Friends, our generations need a fix. I know parents who tell these millennials, which is the new generation, they are lazy, they are this, that, and who educated them? The neighbor? Well, very likely, because now we don't educate our children anymore, right? So who is educating them? Somebody else. But from an early age, they need to see us working, and they need to appreciate work. Oftentimes, because of previous lives and the humiliations of working, because now we're appreciating a little bit more the power of work. But in the past, work was only for people who had a lower social status. And we still have that stereotype that labor-intensive things are for those who are not in a greater status. I remember even a Spiritist center. We were organizing a Spiritist event, and I was at the SSB, the Spirit Center of Baltimore. I was helping like anybody else. And I remember a newcomer coming to me and say, but you're the president of the center and you are also cleaning? Well, you should know better that when you go higher in the hierarchy, you don't do what the other people do. They work for you. And I said, not in the center. We work for them. We can't lose sight that in our centers, Spiritist centers, in our homes, there is no hierarchy of position. Work is for everybody. I wash and I clean and I swipe and I vacuum and I dust like everybody else. And actually, more. Mentor Joseph always reminds me, those who are head of a Spiritist organization, they need to work at least 3 times harder than anybody else. Because it's about vibrational conquest. We are not ahead, morally speaking. That's why we need to work harder to make things fall in place. Work harder. People may not understand. It doesn't matter. But we feel it. We feel it. So we are learning here to our children. Teach how precious it is to work and to serve and to clean. The other day we had somebody fixing something in our home. Virginia was curious. And she wanted to watch it and ask the man what he was doing, etc. And for a moment I felt the impulse of getting her away from it. Mentor Joseph said, teach her the importance of learning these tasks. Well, but Joseph, I don't think she's going to be a constructor. I said, you never know tomorrow. And I said, okay, Virginia, let's watch it. Let's learn from this friend of ours how to do it. We may need that skill in the future. Thank you, Mentor Joseph. That's very wise. We don't know tomorrow. Being a boy or a girl, we need to learn everything. Not only for this life, but for immortality. So understood the greatness of Gamaliel's concepts. And taking his hand, he kissed it with profound respect. Are we respectful to the people who have come ahead of us, who have opened a pathway for us? He learned his respect, and gently he said, love the description of the emotional body language. We need to pay attention when we read these books, because that has a language in itself. I expected nothing from you except your honesty and sincerity to illuminate my mind. I shall once again learn about the path of life. I shall find in the sound of the loom the gentle and friendly encouragement of sanctifying work. I shall live with those less smiled upon by fortune. I shall more intimately become involved in their daily troubles. In contact with other people's pain, I shall learn to conquer my own lower impulses, becoming more patient and more humane. Are you surprised? I am. I've read this book many times, but whenever I read it again and study it again, I am mesmerized by it. By how Saul was special. How he was special. How can a person change that much? He didn't. He already had inside of him. It's not surprising at all when we go back and we know that he was already tender and loving and gentle to the woman in his life. Now he's opening up to the world. He's opening up to the world. So now Gamaliel says, go ahead. May God bless your hopes. And he goes and he says, well, I would imagine that the problems involving in going back would not be small. And I'm not including money problems amongst them because we could somehow acquire some for your most urgent expenses. I'm simply referring to the dangers of the situation you have been going through. I think you should return to Jerusalem or Tarsus only after having been completely integrated in your new duties, meaning stronger. Every plant is fragile when it first begins to grow. How many people come to spiritist centers, they find a pathway, they want to give talks, they want to give passes, they want to be mediums. The plant is fragile. Wait, get stronger. Hi, Daniela. The most promising bud will not develop if covered with waste and mire. It would be better to return home to friends and family as a leafy tree, honoring the delicate of the divine cultivator. So is worried. What do I do then? His former teachers thought for a moment and explained. You know, that the desert regions hold a large market for leather goods. Transportation depends entirely on able and dedicated weavers. My brother is here. So, bottom line, he is bridging it up. So his brother, Gamaliel, Hezekiah, who is in the business, can bridge it up to him. We know what's going to happen next, right? He comes to meet new friends. Who are they? Aquila and Prisca. Aquila and Prisca. He's going to spend a few years in the desert. And I'm turning the pages to get to the next moment for us when he meets Aquila and Prisca. Okay? You love it? Me too. But that's the decision. The desert of the dry lands trying to work upon inside of us. Getting stronger, finding a new pattern, and then we're able to transition to the field of work with greater strength. When people come to spiritist centers, we need to ask them to be patient. It's not because we don't want them to work. We want 1 million workers, not only 1 or 2 or 10, a zillion. And it's not up to us. We're not the recruiters. It is Jesus. But what can we do? We can only help them like coaches. I think presidents of spiritist centers are like coaches. They are like guiding people because they are receiving the guidance too and telling people, let's work more on this together, let's work more on that together, and let's focus on this, let's focus on that, and together, teamwork effort, teamwork effort, teamwork effort. It's not easy. It's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. And he gets to know of new friends, Aquila and Prisca, and he learns that both they are working. The 2 workers of the small workshop welcome him with great display of fraternity and affinity. For those who are reading the paperback, it's page 300. And here we have him with the noblest spiritual qualities, the youthfulness of the couple, teaching as husband and wife, a beautiful example of marriage, Aquila and Prisca for us. Mutual respect. On their first day of work together, Soul noticed their mutual respect, the perfect harmony of their ideas, the high ideal of duty characterizing their mannerisms, and above all, the healthy joy radiating from their smallest gestures. Their pure and generous habits enchanted Soul, disillusioned by human hypocrisy. The meals were simple, each utensil had its own use and proper place, and the conversation, always joyful, never sank to gossip and frivolousness. And many people, they claim to be spiritists, be Christians, And they love to be sarcastic, to be bullies, to be ironic, and filled with hypocrisy. So, are we in that field? We need to meditate on this. Jesus never stopped to discuss what people were doing wrong. He was always focused on what is needed to do to help others. Well, the months go by, and Saul finds out that Aquila and Prisca are followers of Jesus' teachings. And it's beautiful because they talk about it. And they say something quite beautiful here, that Simon Peter, look at this. If we ever see somebody who is in the wrong direction, look at this. Yesterday we talked about this a little bit. They said that Simon Peter recommended to everyone not to hate Saul of Tarsus and to pray for him. When he heard that, they didn't know that he was the very soul, of Saul of Tarsus. They didn't know. And they simply kept praying, and they are not falling for anger or judgment or recrimination or discrimination. Saul was silent. And Aquila turned to his wife and said, Prisca, do you remember how earnestly we entreated the Lord for the persecutor in the intimate prayers at the church? They are talking to Saul about how much they prayed for him, not knowing that he is Saul of Tarsus. Do we pray for people who are like that? Are we praying for the president-elect? Are we praying for, Fidel Castro? I know. He died, and people are like, we need to pray for him. He's part of our boat, the boat of earth. I don't know if he's going to be exiled or not. It's not up to me. I'm no judge. But are we praying? Or are we just like children? Children, thinking that we own the right to judge people. I remember Mentor Joseph saying, you could be next, entering the vortex of obsession when you laugh and you despise people who are going through it. We're not invulnerable. Gamaliel had tears in his eyes. No, he was like, there can be no doubt that Peter is one of the great brothers of the unfortunate. The conversation took a different direction, but there is a moment that they actually reveal. He reveals to them, I am Saul. I am Saul of Tarsus. I am the one, and I assume full responsibility. He says, this is where it goes. My friends, under the Lord's inspiration, it's right that we confess one another. We often don't do this, right? My hands callous from work and my efforts to learn well the virtues of the faith that both of you have exemplified to me should be a testimony to my spiritual renewal. I am Saul of Tarsus, the cruel persecutor become penitent servant. And if I ever heard much, today I need much. In his mercy, Jesus rent the miserable tunic of my illusions. Regenerative suffering came to my heart, washing it with the tears of pain. I lost everything that implied worldly deference, and gained by taking up the cross and following the Master. It is true that I have not yet embraced the cross of constructive and sanctifying struggle, but I am persevering in the effort of denying myself, despising my past of inequity, in order to merit the cross of my ascension toward God. As Josiah Korngold very well reminded us, in the event we had last week in Long Island. Beautiful event. She said, after centuries of bad choices, now we found the teachings and Spiritism. Yeah, it feels good, I know. Thank you, Soul of Tarsus, for being a role model for us in that regard. Thank you, Jesus, for choosing him for us. Because he is us, and we are him. As Jussara said, as a reminder, we often want credit and merit, and we have barely started our own redemption. We have done so many things, and now we are already feeling like the authority, pointing fingers. How can we do that? Quiz for us. Where is our 0 to 10, 0 to 10 scale? Where are we regarding our judgmental nature? 0 being not strong, 10 being too strong. Are we still too judgmental like the Pharisees? Thinking that we're morally upright and entitled to judging everyone in our lives? And to demand from others a correct attitude? And when we see people who are going through challenges, we simply, like the Pharisees, like the hypocrites, we mock them to other friends, saying, ha, 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 you see, that person is obsessed. They are going through this problem, that problem. That is not spiritually aligned. Are we still too judgmental? In the book, Sex and Destiny, André Luiz describes a beautiful scenario about what we cause to others when we're being judgmental. André Luiz breaks it down to us that when we're being judgmental, we are vibratorily pushing the people down to the abyss of their mistakes. So we are becoming co-responsible for their mistakes because we're pushing them with our negative vibrations. Surprise, surprise. Let's read André Luiz's books. This book is Sex and Destiny, the chapter in which, one of the first chapters, when André Luiz and Pedro Neves, the father of the woman who is in the hospital, are observing the cheating of her husband next door to her hospital room. He's becoming judgmental, and next to it they learn. Boom. They are just pushing them to be more and more into the wrongdoing. More and more into it. Are we doing this? Well, Aquila and Prisca were astonished. And he says, don't doubt my words. Don't doubt my words. Please forgive me taking into consideration my criminal ignorance. The weaver and his wife understood that his tears were choking his voice. Overcome by great emotion, Saul began to weep convulsively. Thanks to Emmanuel, we know Saul of Tarsus was real human being. Thank you, Rita. You're right. It's very important to love and pray for someone that hurts our feelings and souls. And yeah, the Jesus lesson is amazing. Changes our life night and day. And they say they are completely in awe. And they say, without hiding the joy, brother Saul, let us rejoice in the Lord, because as brothers we were separate, but now we are together again. Let us not talk of the past, but of the power of Jesus who transforms us with his love. Talking the past, how often we change our lives, and we are often talking the past. Often talking the past. And we are in Spiritist meetings and we are telling everybody, but you know, years ago I used to do this, and years ago this happened in my life, and years ago, and in my previous life, and Thank God we don't remember previous lives, because it could be so troubling. People cannot forget the past. We need to practice mindfulness. Jesus was always mindful. He was never anxious, and he was never depressed about the past, concerned about the past, nostalgic. He was always here, fully present. We need to exercise. How do we exercise it? Right now, breathing in and out, and we visualize that we are spirits connected to this physical body, enveloped by the perispirit, and here. Tomorrow we're not going to be here. We're not going to be with these people. We're going to be in a different status, situation. What can we do now? Be fully present. Fully present. And that's how we enter chapter 13. It's titled Struggles and Humiliations. Let us not forget that in the previous chapter, Ananias reminded us that inevitably, when we have guilt, we've made mistakes, and who amongst us has never done any? We will go through suffering to calibrate our vibrations. And once we calibrate our vibrations, we'll be more attuned with the higher spirits, and we'll be able to work more. The journey after meeting Aquila and Prisca, since he's now moving to Damascus, Aquila and his wife would remain there for some time until they could fulfill their beautiful dream of working in Rome. But Saul of Tarsus, after thanking them, headed to Damascus, radically changed by 3 years of meditation in the desert. Meditation in the desert of his heart, in the desert of his life. The journey went smoothly, and that's very interesting. You see the difference? The journey before was hard. Now the journey is smoother. Why? Because he is attuned. He is calibrated. Now he understands. He is ready for the challenges. However, in his new solitude, Saul realized that invisible powers are conferring him lofty and consoling inspirations of his mind. Thanks to Emmanuel, we know he was never alone. Never. In the star-filled night, he had the feeling that he was hearing a loving and wise voice expressing itself through appeals of infinite love and hope. From the moment he parted ways with Aquila and his wife's loving company and felt completely alone for the great undertaking of his new destiny, he had found an unexpected inner strength unknown to him before. Yes, he could not define that spiritual state, but the fact was that Stephen remained nearby as a loyal companion under Jesus' guidance from then on. A revelation to us. Jesus assigned Stephen to guide Paul's steps. Paul. And he was constantly there, inspiring. His mediumistic abilities were opening wider. But in spite of it all, don't we all have, in spite of all the gifts he had, don't we all have a guardian angel? Loving spirits who love us? So next time you feel these sweet vibrations, let us turn to the spirits and say, thank you for the sweet and the kind, loving vibrations. May I be easy in your hands. Those exhortations, those gentle and friendly voices that were to assist him throughout his whole apostolic journey, and which he attributed directly to the Savior, in fact came from the kind-hearted martyr of the way. How many people claim, I heard Jesus' voice. I heard Mary. It's possible. But remember, we're connected to spirits that are superior to us. They have a higher connection. Connections that are directly to the hearts of Jesus and Mary and others. So it's very likely that in this teamwork effort, we're feeling the vibrations. Okay? So don't doubt when somebody says, oh, I saw Jesus. This person is crazy. No. Saul said all along he heard the voice of Jesus. Was he crazy? No, he was right. Now Emmanuel explains. It was Stephen who brought the messages from Jesus to him. Well, it came from Jesus. If President Obama writes a letter to you and I deliver to you, is the letter from Obama or from me? From Obama. But Vanessa delivered. I wish I could deliver that letter. But anyhow, who sent the message? Obama. Who delivered? Vanessa or anybody else? Who sent the message? Jesus. Who delivered? Stephen. So the message is from Jesus. Period. No doubt. If somebody says, I felt Chico Xavier. Oh, no, but Chico Xavier now is only going to talk to the president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. You really think so? When he was incarnated, he talked to everybody. Why now is he going to be selective? It would be the opposite, right? He would talk to more people now because he's freer than before. So please, this vanity shall be trashed out. Vanity, mediumistic vanity, thinking that only a few are entitled to communication with spirits or certain spirits. And who are we to claim? In the book Missionaries of the Light, there is a beautiful chapter, chapter 5, in which there are 3 family members who go to a spiritist center. The mom and the brother participate in the mediumistic meeting. And the young girl, who's only 16, she goes to the center, but she does not exercise ostensible mediumship. To our surprise, she is used as the venue of Mentor Alexander to give great counseling, great warnings to her mother and her brother. She's younger. She's not a labeled spiritist medium per se. And André Luiz shows to us that these labels, anything, is not the key. The key is she kept herself pure to the connection of the high spirits. She is true to her heart, and she's not intoxicated, like filled with the toxins of, he says, slander is one of them. Talking bad about people just creates toxins for our system and impediment for the connection with the higher spirits. So, who knows who can be the instrument of high spirits? Hopefully, the people who are the simplest, the people who complicate life much less and who are constantly focused on those who are suffering. They are certainly going to be the instruments of the good spirits. And it can be anyone, not necessarily a spiritist person. And these are good news for us. So, here we have our dear Emmanuel sharing with us that in this way Jesus willed for the first victim of Jerusalem persecutions to remain forever united to the first executioner of the converts, to his doctrine of life and redemption. We're supposed to be friends, no matter what happened in the past, either in this present life or the previous lives. We're supposed to become friends and work together. Instead of sentiments of remorse and perplexity due to his blameful past and the longing of discouragement that had sometimes threatened his soul, he now felt radiant promises within his renewed spirit. Within, though even though he could not explain the sacred origin of such profound hopes. In spite of the remarkable physiological changes that the life, discipline, and climate of the desert had wrought on him, he entered Damascus with sincere joy in his soul, now completely devoted to Jesus' service. He was joyful at embracing Ananias and talking about his spiritual progress. Ananias receives him and they exchange impressions and start talking to one another. And on the second Sabbath of his stay in the city, he goes to the synagogue. No one recognized him because he was deeply changed. But at a certain moment, he started talking. And he started talking. People started paying attention. When he started elevating Jesus, they said, "It's the traitor, stone him." And he's again witnessing the first struggles, major struggles. Are you Saul of Tarsus? Yes, we feel the love, my friends. The former rabbi of Jerusalem? It says yes, by the grace of Jesus Christ. And they want to arrest him. And they insist in arresting him. And from now on, we're going to learn that his life is on the opposite side of the road. And that's what happens to us. To wrap up today, we're not going to end the chapter today, but we need to learn that when we travel this pathway, there is a possibility that when we see people traveling the other pathway, the opposite, if we don't watch out, we're going to merge onto their pathway. Thank you, friends, for the excitement and the joy. But let us wrap up with the last measurement of the soul for today. In this current world, filled with challenges, my friend, filled with challenges, we're being called to work and to serve more, but first inside of us. So let us measure. What are the things that are most troubling for us? What are the things we see in others that are most troubling for us? Because it's very likely that the things that we point out on others that bother us are going to be precisely the things that are still in us and we have to work upon. What are they? We need to know. We need to know, my friends, and we need to know in order to not fall trap to our own mistakes. So Saul of Tarsus now is not the persecutor. He is now the one who is serving, and he's going to be misunderstood. I've seen this happening even in the spiritist circles. And we ask ourselves, why do we have to go through this pathway of suffering if we can just learn from those who are ahead of us? In our brains, we have a beautiful capacity, from the spiritual brain to the physical brain, the capacity to learn from others and not necessarily incurring the same habits to form the pathways. Thanks to mirror neurons and other mechanisms, just by watching people, we learn things. So by watching the Saul of Tarsus journey, what are we learning the most? To prevent sorrows and struggles. Some people, just out of ego, pride, they say, let me take my journey. If I bump my head, like Saul of Tarsus, I'm going to find my way. And I say, that is, to say the least, silly. Because if you have people who are ahead of us and have walked the journey, why waste your time? Don't think that you're going to reinvent the wheel, because Saul of Tarsus has already unveiled the pathway for us. Why can't we learn from him? And in these current times after the election, the best thing we can do is, for today, pray for those who are persecuting whomever, who are discriminating whomever, who are prejudiced about whomever, who are creating dissensions, who are creating separations. And bless those who are already creating unity, concord, friendliness, kindness, fraternity. May we be the ones who choose fraternity. We began by talking about Jesus not being the King of comfort and pushing us to fraternity. How can we be more fraternal today? So we don't need to struggle that much more, because Saul of Tarsus already showed us the pathway. With much gratitude, let us feel the call to fraternity today. And tomorrow, we're going to keep learning from his own struggles and humiliations. And from his beautiful journey, we're going to find a new self inside of us. And let the ego just dilute itself in the beautiful and blessed waters of Christ, the Christ-conscious hymn of love that embraces us with much affection, letting us know that we're all one, we're all together, we depend on one another. If you're happy, we are happy. So, as Joana de Angelis said to Divaldo Franco, we must be happy. Big hug of gratitude to Carlos, who is taking care of Virginia, to Adriano, who is supporting us here, and to all of you, both at Kardec Radio, which has the transmission of the broadcast right now going on, and all of you who are here joining forces with us in this beautiful journey of redemption for all of us.